battle for our liberties, for our rights, to preserve our rights. We are facing the most anti-gun administration in history, without a doubt. But here's the thing, we're actually advancing freedom in many parts of the country right now. And believe it or not, we're actually winning more battles than the other side is. That, in addition to the fact that we've been able to stall gun control in Congress, at least for now, we've stalled gun control. So today I want to give you the big picture about how this is happening, why this is happening. I want to show you some of the good news that's happening around the country. Some of it's been mentioned already. But it's good to hear again, because look, this is not things that you're going to be hearing on CNN, right? They're not going to be singing our praises. So I'll be talking about what we're doing in Congress, what we're doing in the courts, what we're doing in the states as well. But I want to begin with a story first, because it helps explain what we do and why we do it. I had a conversation with a GOA Life member some time ago. Her name is Lily. She grew up in communist China. She admits that she had drunk the Kool-Aid. You know, she was taught that Mao Zedong was a god, and she believed that. She believed all good things came from him. I mean, that sounds pretty godlike, doesn't it? Well, she was a big believer in communism, of course, until she started seeing the ugly side of it, and her eyes really started being opening. That's when the cracks started forming in her thinking. And then when an American college student who was over there in China later showed her a copy of the Declaration of Independence, her transformation really started accelerating rapidly. She read the words that we all know, but she read them for the first time. All men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those words blew her away. She got very excited. She said, I have rights. All men are created equal, and it doesn't matter what country, what color, what race, I have rights. Well, that conversation that Lily had with that American student, and this took place in the 1980s, that would forever shape her thinking, not only on the world, but on the Second Amendment as well. Because that student also went on to explain to her that Americans can own guns as a matter of right, without permission from their government. And that if government leaders become tyrannical, then people can even use those firearms against the government. I don't know this guy's name, but I wouldn't be surprised if he has since become a GOA member, because this is exactly how we talk, all right? Anyway, the idea that there could be a country that was based on God-given rights rather than on the idea that government grants privileges to people, that greatly intrigued her. So she wanted to come to America, and she did as a college student. So she was attending university, a university in Texas, in 1989, when she received some terrible news about her home country. I bet you can, many of you who are my age or older can probably guess what that was. Tiananmen Square, that's exactly right. Students had been, for you younger folks here, students had been protesting for weeks and weeks and weeks in this big square area. If that was happening here in the United States, we'd be saying, hey, these students are exercising their First Amendment rights, right? Well, of course, there is no First Amendment in China. There is no Second Amendment in China. There is no Bill of Rights in China. After tolerating these student demonstrations for a few weeks, the communists got tired of it, and you know what happened. The Red Army just rolled their tanks over the students, shot indiscriminately into the crowd. Best estimates say that thousands of students were killed and tens of thousands were arrested. Well, Lily was horrified. She called her family back home, and she said, are you watching the news? Are you seeing what's happening, this horror on TV? You know what their reaction was? What tragedy? What are you talking about? They had no idea. They knew nothing about it. Again, there is no First Amendment in China. They don't have a free press. Isn't it amazing that those who love big government don't like the people to be armed with the truth, do they? Heck, they don't want people to be armed either, period, but they certainly don't want people to know how badly they are wrecking the country. There's a talk show host in the DC area, and he frequently says this: the most insidious power that the news media has is the power to ignore. You see, it's the stories that don't get printed, don't get published, that keep people in the dark. Even to this day in China, if you search up Tiananmen Square massacre, you're not going to find anything. It's blocked, and that's horrendous. Of course, we know something about media censorship in this country too, don't we? I mean, Joe Biden's son lies on his 4473 form when purchasing a handgun. He commits a federal crime doing so, but the mainstream media buries it for him. How convenient. Then last month, an armed citizen in Arkansas actually prevented a mass shooting from occurring. You would think that would be big news, right? Did anybody hear about it? Maybe some of you, if you're reading the gun news, you would have seen or heard about it, but it certainly wasn't in any of the big mainstream media. Few people heard about that because the Democrats and the media, but I repeat myself, the Democrats and the media, they don't really love a free press. To paraphrase that classic movie, Princess Bride, remember that? They keep using that word freedom, but I do not think it means what they think it means. And that's exactly their problem. So back to China. This is the problem when the government has all the guns. They can kill thousands of people, arrest 10,000s more, and just keep everybody in the dark. It's often been said that a disarmed people turns people into slaves, not citizens. And that's a universal truth. Of course, facts are like kryptonite to anti-gun liberals. They just can't handle the truth. Although sometimes, maybe once every 17 years when the cicadas come out. I'm from the DC area. We actually have cicadas there. I haven't heard any up here. You guys are blessed not to have to deal with that. But yeah, every once in a while you can get an anti-gun liberal to actually understand how bad it is, how dangerous it is for government to have all the guns. You know how you do that? You ask them this: so, you think Trump was the most dangerous president we ever had, right? You think he was an authoritarian and his name is synonymous with Adolf Hitler, right? So, if he were to be elected in, say, 2024, again, are you okay with giving him all the guns? That's when you see the bug hit the zapper. Yeah, all of a sudden, it's fun watching their heads explode. All of a sudden, for a brief moment, they get it. See, they get it when their safety is affected. They talk about those scary black rifles, right? But then when Nancy Pelosi felt threatened after January 6th, what did she do? She surrounded the Capitol with thousands of those scary black rifles, right? She couldn't be more hypocritical if her goal was to be hypocritical. Anyway, back to Lily. She has since become, by the way, I don't think those black rifles are scary. I love those. But Lily has since become an American citizen. She's run for office. She's testified before state legislatures. But she told me she's very sad by what she sees happening here. She says, I hate to see the country that I love becoming the country that I left. And I think that's very sad. Regardless, she loves warning people about the true evils of socialism. She has spoken to thousands of students around the country. And she's especially effective with liberal students because, after all, she used to be one. When I spoke with her, she mentioned to me that she had a Bernie Sanders supporter, a student, come up to her recently there and had admitted to her that she had converted him away from socialism. Sometimes it's the converts who make the best spokesman, the best proselytes. But what's beautiful about this story is it all began with her reading the Declaration of Independence, and that's what opened up her eyes. By the way, I teach civil government in my off hours. All my students are forced to read the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. Every single one of them. They get tested on that. I think that's very important. You know, those words are life-changing. All men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. It certainly changed Lily's life, but long before that, those words were the foundation of our country, of our Constitution, of our Second Amendment. After all, when you think about it, when we say shall not be infringed, that's just another way. It's the flip side of the coin of talking about our rights being unalienable. I mean, that's how rights work. When you talk about what does unalienable mean, it means that our rights cannot be limited or surrendered. They can't be taken away or diminished. Putting it practically, it means no registration of guns or gun owners, no waiting periods, no background checks, no bans. In other words, no infringements, right? So those words in the Declaration of Independence are the foundation really for what we believe at GOA. Those words explain what we do and why we do it. And that's why for us it's so important to just repeal it all. The NFA, the GCA, the Hughes Amendment, the Brady Law. I mean, like that American student told Lily, we shouldn't have to ask permission from the government to exercise our rights. And that's why for us it's so important to push so hard for permitless carry, otherwise known as constitutional carry. By the way, Gun Owners of America, we were the first organization at the national level to push for constitutional carry way back in the 1990s. And of course, as has already been mentioned here, we're making tremendous strides there. But what's amazing is how far we've come. At the turn of this century, we only had one constitutional carry state. You know what state that was, right? It was Vermont, right. In fact, we used to call it Vermont-style carry. That's right, one state. Today, as has already been mentioned here at the pulpit, there's 20 states that now, this is just in a couple of decades. Now, we now have 20 states and more are on the way. In fact, I'll talk about that in a minute. But in many ways, this year has been fantastic despite some of the threats that we've been facing at the national level with the Biden administration. But what's interesting is that from the start, there were some people who wanted to throw in the towel. I mean, they were ready to give up. I mean, clearly, there was a lot of people disheartened by two main things. One was the presidential election. The other was the two senatorial races in Georgia. So we started hearing from gun owners after that, people who were very despondent. They were saying political action makes no difference. They were ready to throw in the towel. And here's what we would respond. You can't say political action makes no difference when GOA won every single one of its congressional races in the 2020 election where we were supporting a sitting congressman. I mean, that is really unheard of. I mean, we were batting 100%. But it's true, we won every single race. And when you throw in a lot of the new challengers that we helped get elected, I mean, we're talking about dozens and dozens of new, fresh faces in the Congress. I know many of you are familiar with some of them, like Lauren Boebert of Colorado. I flew out there personally to stump on the campaign for her. Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. I mean, these are two fantastic individuals. And there's even more there that don't get as much of the limelight but are just as solid. You know, Nancy Pelosi actually has the slimmest majority in decades. She was expecting to increase her lead in November. That's what the polls were telling her, and they believe their own polls. Foolish. But instead, now she has the majority by a whisker, and she's poised probably to lose it in the next election. Yeah. The left was predicting a blue wave in 2020, and it didn't happen. And it didn't happen even though Michael Daddy Warbucks Bloomberg spent about $1 billion on congressional and presidential elections. I mean, he spent millions of dollars trying to flip legislatures from anti-gun, from pro-gun to anti-gun in places like Iowa, Minnesota, and Texas, but he failed. Actually, all of them experienced pro-gun increases, and they're more pro-gun today. Then in North Carolina, he actually went after one of my personal friends, spent $10 million trying to defeat just one man, Mark Robinson, for lieutenant governor in North Carolina. Bloomberg failed there too. If you haven't heard Mark Robinson, search him up. He is fantastic, fiery. Anyway, again, Bloomberg reportedly spent $1 billion on the elections.
Yeah.
By contrast, we spent just a little over $1 million in terms of our Get Out the Vote effort. Thankfully, our money outperformed Big Daddy Warbucks. So in the end, there was a lot of winning by our team, and yet some people were ready to throw in the towel after all that winning. I mean, yeah, we didn't win every race, but there was a lot of winning there. You see, that's the problem. The mainstream media and the Democrats, that's what they want to do to you, is dispirit you. They want you to give up, and that's why they only give you part of the story. They only give you that which is intended, quite frankly, to dispirit you. Remember, the most insidious power of the news media is the power to ignore. So anyway, that was last November. Now here we are in mid-June, and we're still doing a lot of winning. The victories have continued rolling in. For example, as has been mentioned earlier, 4 states passed constitutional carry this year: Utah, Montana, Tennessee, and Iowa. So like I said, that brings us up to 20 states. Remember, we just had only one in 2000. Now we're at 20 just 2 decades later. That is a phenomenal increase. And for all the press that red flag laws get, and by the way, Dan Wass did a great job hammering red flag laws. Red flag laws are a huge problem, but do you know that as of now, we have more constitutional carry states than there are red flag states? So, we you know, if it's a competition, we are winning right now. How about that? By the way, there's 2 more states that, Lord willing, are going to be joining the Constitutional Carry Club soon. It's been mentioned already, Texas, but also Louisiana. I should say the Democrat governor in Louisiana has threatened to veto the bill. We are generating hundreds upon hundreds of calls into his office. We'll see how that goes, but even if he vetoes it, the constitutional carry bill passed by a veto-proof majority in both chambers. So the writing is on the wall there in Louisiana. We're eventually going to get it. I think we eventually will, and when we do, that'll take us to 22 states with constitutional carry. I mean, that's almost half the country. That is truly remarkable. You know, in the 1990s, there were some pro-gunners who were opposing us at Gun Owners of America on constitutional carry. They said that permitless carry was kooky. They said that it would never pass. And now, here we're pushing to have it passed in almost half the country. See, that's why Gun Owners of America, we are no compromise. The Constitution is our standard, the Second Amendment, the Declaration of Independence, and that's our marching orders. And if you think it's too kooky, well, sorry, but follow, shut up, or get out of the way, because we're going to push the Constitution. So freedom is advancing. Then there's the Second Amendment sanctuary states. We've had great success in that area. I'll talk a little more about that in just a second, but all to say, there's a lot to be encouraged about that. There's because there are huge threats at the federal level. So want to just talk about a little bit how we're going to plan to neuter and stop gun control in Congress. But first, let me just say it's really important to have some perspective, because without it, I think we do tend to get dispirited. We hear the news and it gets us down. I live in a home where my wife doesn't even like me having the news on because it just gets her so upset. And I feel that. I mean, I think it happens to all of us. And I think one of the things that I've learned is you can get a lot of encouragement by remembering past battles, remembering previous battles. And it doesn't matter really if they're from the recent. Alan was given a recent victory here from the past week or from the way past. But it's good to remember how we've overcome threats before. Anybody here like history?
Yeah.
Good. That's
history.
great. I'm in a room full of people who love history. All right, class is in. 243 years ago today, do you know where George Washington was? He and his men, I know that's a pretty specific year count, because I've done the math. He and his men were breaking camp in June from Valley Forge. And you know the story with Valley Forge. I mean, first of all, I know you guys know something about cold winters up here. But Valley Forge, from what we read, was a particularly cold winter that year. Washington had men who died from exposure, influenza, pneumonia. Almost 2,000 troops died during their stay at Valley Forge. They weren't even engaged in battles. You know, Washington had to face desertion by his troops, people walking with no clothes, no blankets, no shoes, leaving huge trails of blood in the snow. I mean, it's no wonder that people were deserting, and in fact it got so bad that Washington was even threatening to have deserters shot on sight. I mean, that's how bad the situation had gotten. So how did that ragtag group win against a better funded, well-rested enemy? Well, I'll tell you how. One of my favorite portraits of all time, maybe my chief favorite, is hanging in my office right now, and it's that portrait of George Washington. I'm sure you guys have seen this. It's the one of him in the snow at Valley Forge, and he's kneeling next to his horse, and he's in prayer. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with that picture. If you can just picture that in his mind. What's interesting about that, you know, whether or not that literally happened the way that portrait displays it, people who knew Washington say that's the kind of man he was. Several times he was interrupted when he was in the midst of personal prayer, just, you know, asking God for help. That's who the man he was. And so anyway, that's why I like that painting. It's a reminder to me of where the real battle is won and fought. And George Washington knew this, and so did our founding fathers. I mean, listen to the words that Thomas Jefferson penned for all the other founders in the Declaration of Independence. He said that in the midst of the battle that they were fighting, that they were appealing to the supreme judge of the world to give them the help that they needed. The supreme judge of the world. Folks, they weren't talking about the United Nations. That's not what they were talking about. And those were words that every single one of those founders signed their name to in agreement. You know, they had it really rough. I mean, people were being shot and dying, and that might have been some reason for fear, a reason to want to feel like you want to throw in the towel. Maybe they had a reason for that. But what about us today? I mean, after all, they didn't throw in the towel. They kept fighting. So today, what's our battle plan? Is there a battle plan? Well, besides following George Washington's example, which is something that I think we should follow, I'll give you a two-pronged attack that GOA is implementing right now. And both of these are very significant. First of all, preserving the filibuster. I mean, for those of you who remember your civics, okay, and I'm a civics teacher, and you know, we talk about things like this. The filibuster in the Senate, it's crucial. It means that instead of passing a bill 51 votes out of 100, now it's got to be 60 votes out of 100. That is the dam that is holding back gun control right now. It's right there. And not surprisingly, that's why Schumer and the other Democrats and Biden want to get rid of the filibuster, even though you can find videotape of them in years past begging and pleading, don't get rid of the filibuster, this is important for democracy, even though we're a republic. You know, this is so key. Well, it is important, but now that it benefits them to get rid of it, they want to get rid of it. But if that happens, mind you, they'll be able to slam through all kinds of gun control, and it'll be much more effective passing gun control legislation than simply doing it with the stroke of a pen, because whatever Biden does by a stroke of a pen, as bad as it is, guess what? In 2024, it can be undone by the stroke of a pen. So if they get rid of that filibuster, we're talking universal background checks, gun bans, I mean the whole litany of things, packing SCOTUS, packing the courts so that everything they pass is legal, rigging the system to keep anti-gun Democrats permanently in power, because that would mean overriding state election laws to allow for greater election fraud. It would mean DC statehood to get 2 additional anti-gun votes in the Senate. It means repealing the Gun Makers Protection Act, which means putting the gun industry out of business with frivolous lawsuits. Universal background checks, which of course is all about gun owner registration. I mean, this is the horror story we face. And believe it or not, it's the filibuster. It's like, being on a cliff, hanging by your fingernails, but that is what is preserving us right now. The filibuster is the key to stopping that. In 2013, this is precisely what we used. We worked with Republicans who initially just wanted to take Obama gun control and maybe make it not so bad. We came in with our members, flooded their offices with calls and said, we want you to filibuster, we want you to kill this. And then that's what they did. The New York Times actually, after the fact, printed an article crediting GOA with killing Obama's gun control. And it was because of our members. Alan was talking about the power of the grassroots. That was the power of gun-owning members in 2013. That's how we killed it. Today, we're mobilizing activists still, and of course we're doing it in some key states. Certainly when we're talking about the filibuster, we've been mobilizing people in West Virginia, Arizona, and Montana because of 3 key senators that are there. So that's the big battle at the federal level in the Congress. So far, we are winning that, much to the frustration of Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden. They haven't been able to get any gun control passed, and that's why Biden has taken to the pen, which I'll talk about that in just a second. But speaking, it's, they say elephants have good memories, and Republicans always want to revert back to their old way of doing things. And so rather than just stonewalling, utilizing the fact that they have a filibuster-proof Senate, 2 senators were, one key senator, Senator John Cornyn, we found out recently was working with Democrat Chris Murphy to get a consensus on universal background checks. You can boo if you want to at that. So we found out about this, and we started pumping emails and phone calls into the Senate, but especially into Cornyn's office. So despite his efforts to make a bad bill just not quite as bad, after several key phone calls coming in from grassroots members, especially some really high Republican donors who were really ticked off at what Cornyn was doing, we read this in the media just this week. By midweek, here's the report by CNN. Senators Cornyn and Murphy are unable to find an agreed-upon outcome, and talks have ceased. Isn't that great? See, that's how you do it. We found out about the compromise, we alerted our members, we activated them, and then all of a sudden it's like, oops, not so interested anymore. If you've ever wondered if your phone calls and your emails make a difference, Alan gave you an example. This is a recent example. Yes, they do make a huge, tremendous difference. And obviously that's why we need to keep the filibuster. If there wasn't a filibuster, Chris Murphy and the Democrats, they wouldn't need Cornyn's help. They wouldn't need to find a compromise. They would just ram these things through. So keeping the filibuster, that's our number 1 legislative priority, our legislative strategy. Our second line of attack is working at the state level to resist gun control at the federal level. And so that, of course, is the Second Amendment sanctuaries. And so we've been mobilizing voters and activists, gun owners, in several key states: Arizona, Arkansas, Montana, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and West Virginia. By the way, all those states became Second Amendment sanctuary states this year. See, grassroots activism works. You know how this works. Basically, these sanctuary laws prevent state officers from helping Biden's team to enforce federal gun laws. And that's significant because, look, with some federal gun crimes, the feds prosecute less than 1% of them at the federal level. The rest are prosecuted at the state level. So if the states say they're not going to help enforce these federal gun laws, then guess what? They don't get prosecuted. See, that it's that simple. Now, this type of non-assistance is already occurring at the county level. I mean, Jared was talking about this earlier. You know, we've got not only county ordinances, but even sheriffs that have said we're not going to enforce gun control. For example, in Colorado, I love this. Several sheriffs went on record saying they're not going to enforce the state's magazine ban. And that's a good thing because you know what? Criminals aren't going to obey that ban, right? So, in a joint statement, this is great. These sheriffs, these are pro-America sheriffs. They said, if law enforcement agencies believe a magazine that holds 20 or 30 rounds is best for defense, then those magazines are the best option for regular people who want to defend themselves. And they're absolutely right. There are many, many examples of people using AR-15s with 15 to 30 round magazines to save their lives. I mean, you know, I'm sure, I don't have to tell you guys. You know the stories of the Los Angeles riots, the Ferguson riots, more recently in 2014. I mean, these were the very guns that people were using to protect themselves, protect their stores, and yet sadly, these are the very guns that Joe Biden wants to ban. So as of now, there's almost a dozen states that are resisting the federal government's overreach into the realm of people's gun rights. And this is truly amazing. Let me give you, just by way of comparison, before Joe Biden was elected, there was only 4 states that had that were sanctuary Second Amendment states. But already now, by the end of May, that number has almost tripled. So we now have 11 states, and more are on the way. Texas, Missouri, New Hampshire, Louisiana, all these are very close to passing and having sanctuary status for their states as well. So Jared mentioned earlier, you know, we've got now at the county level, 56% of the counties, if you count counties or the states encompassing those counties, 56% of the counties in this nation are Second Amendment sanctuary status. So that's very exciting, truly amazing. You know, our 4th president, the father of the Constitution, James Madison, would be very happy at what is happening with this, because after all, the Founding Fathers always expected that it would be the states that would step in and protect the people whenever the government decided to act outside of its authority. That's what Virginia and Kentucky did in 1798 with the Alien and Sedition Acts. They told Congress, you better repeal these or we're going to refuse to allow those laws to be enforced within our borders. And basically, if you know the history of those laws, they basically punished people with prison time for merely criticizing government officials. One of Ben Franklin's grandsons, he was a publisher, was even criticized for, arrested for criticizing John Adams. Never mind the First Amendment, right? Well, Virginia and Kentucky challenged the Alien and Sedition Acts, and James Madison, writing for Virginia, wrote that when the federal government is acting outside of its authority, the states are, quote, duty-bound to interpose for arresting the progress of evil. So that was Virginia and Kentucky in 1798. Later, you then saw the northern states also engaging in interposing and creating sanctuaries in the 1800s when they made it illegal for citizens to help return escaped slaves to their owners. Or put another way, states were intervening to protect people from the tyranny of the federal government. And guess what? While the Supreme Court sadly upheld the Fugitive Slave Act in 1842. It thankfully did uphold that the feds are not allowed to force the states to do their dirty work. This was reinforced again in 1997 with the Brady Act. Congress wanted the sheriffs to conduct background checks for gun sales, but the Supreme Court affirmed in the Prince case, you can't do that. The Congress cannot commandeer the states and force them to enforce federal law. So this is the blueprint that states are following right now. And it's very exciting. Like I said, we're now at 11 or 12 sanctuary states. That's now actually more than immigration sanctuary states. I mean, at the start of this year, there were far more immigration sanctuary states. Now we've overtaken them. So good things are happening all over the country. Good things are happening at the state level, the federal level, and also in the courts. There's been some of that mentioned here. Great things are happening. I mean, the recent Supreme Court decision with the Caniglia case was fantastic. This was a case that Gun Owners of America was involved in as well. But it was a very important case. With this win, police can't come into your home without a warrant and confiscate your guns, which should have been a no-brainer anyway with the Second and Fourth Amendment. But this was huge, because can you imagine what the alternative would have been if the Supreme Court had gone against us? It would have been Katie bar the door. So that was one big win. Then there's a case the Supreme Court will be hearing next term, dealing with the May issue concealed carry permits. We're very hopeful that this case is going to go our way, because we've got some key pro-gun Supreme Court justices. I guess you can't call them pro-gun, we should call them pro-constitution. They're not supposed to be partisan, but they've been begging for an opportunity to rule on a Second Amendment case, because they're tired of how the lower courts are just ignoring the Constitution and the Heller and the McDonald decisions. So this is exciting, because a good decision here could have monumental benefits for states like this one, also New Jersey, New York, California, and Hawaii, that have struggled through the years with officials using discretion under a May issue system. So that's two key cases. In other court news, we won our bump stock case in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. Now, this is really important. The GOA bump stock case is the only case that is won in the entire country. There's other cases, other bump stock cases. The GOA case is the only one that won. And that's, you can look it up, it's GOA versus Garland. We sometimes get asked, what's the big deal with bump stocks? I hate bump stocks, I'm never going to use a bump stock. You know what, you want to know what the big deal is? You all know who David Chipman is, right? I don't have to tell this crowd, right? I mean, he's who the president has nominated to run the ATF, not the AFT, the ATF. So Chipman, as a lobbyist for the anti-gun Giffords organization, authored a document that said, here are 9 executive actions that can be done to follow the bump stock example. You see, it doesn't matter how we may feel about bump stocks, and you may never want one. I mean, they're kind of cool. But the bump stock ban became the precedent for a whole lot more gun control. So what kind of things might Biden be doing? Well, Chipman, as a lobbyist for the Giffords organization, said you can ban so-called large capacity magazines. I think they're more standard capacity, but ban pistol braces, ban 50 caliber ammunition. I mean, does all of this sound familiar? See, this is Joe Biden's agenda for the country and for the Second Amendment. See, this is why it's so important that we beat the ATF on this bump stock ban. So the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals said that the ATF acted unconstitutionally and exceeded their authority in creating the bump stock ban. And so if we can make this stick, because they are appealing the decision, if we can make it stick, that becomes the basis for striking down all of Biden's gun control agenda. And that's how you do it. I mean, that's the leaven that leavens the whole loaf. Of course, as I mentioned, ATF is appealing that decision, so you can follow what's happening by going to our website at gunowners.org. Speaking of the ATF, our legal team is issuing comments right now in opposition to those two recent executive actions by the Biden administration. One involves homemade guns, the other involves pistol braces, and taken together, both of these executive actions are all about gun registration, gun owner registration, and gun bans that are going to affect millions upon millions of people. Really up to about 40 million arm braces are going to be affected. So we're talking about millions of gun owners that are going to be affected. So that's the most recent one from this past week. The executive action is going to force millions of gun owners to either destroy, register, or surrender their pistol-braced firearms without any compensation whatsoever, after the ATF had been telling them for years that these were legal. Now, these two executive actions haven't gone into effect yet, okay, because we're still in the comment period, but we are already lining up plaintiffs to challenge these once they do go into effect. And by the way, that's not the only way we can take care of this. Remember, this is all being done by a stroke of the pen, right? If you live by the stroke of the pen, you lose by the stroke of the pen. The next president can come in and undo the whole thing. Bottom line, we are involved in a lot of legal cases right now, helping defend so-called large capacity magazines in California, suing Philadelphia over their ban on homemade guns, suing Philadelphia and Connecticut because they've been dragging their feet on issuing concealed carry permits, defending Second Amendment sanctuaries in Oregon where they're taking it to court and they're trying to create a precedent to strike down Second Amendment sanctuaries around the country. We've got cases from Washington State to Virginia, all around the country. We've been, in the last year, involved in Massachusetts, Maryland, North Carolina, many other states. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Again, you can find out more at our website at gunowners.org. It's a long list. But again, what's really encouraging is that we've been winning a lot of these cases in the court. No wonder the anti-gun liberals want to pack the courts. They just can't stand losing. They used to have a lock on the courts, but now they're losing a lot. So thanks to the help and support of our members, and thanks, quite frankly, to God's grace, we've done very well in the courts over the last year and a half. And so, and again, we're winning not only in the courts and the Congress, but across the country and the states. And these things don't just happen by themselves. I mean, some of the states are bearing fruit this year because we've been so hard at work for several years. For example, Texas, which has already been mentioned, passed constitutional carry. This only came about after a decade-long process where our state director was actively working to rally the grassroots, to speak all across Texas about how people can get involved in the legislative process. She got people to show up at legislative hearings. She got activists to block walk for candidates and get good guys and gals elected. And she's been leading some of these newly elected people by the hand in getting constitutional carry through the legislature, through the legislative process. I mean, we've gone from a period where Texas thought, even shall issue carry was kind of kooky. Texas has this reputation as being, shoot 'em up type of thing, but their laws on guns are not actually that good. They're not one of the best in the country. And so, we couldn't even get a legislative hearing on constitutional carry, and now it's going to the governor's desk. So this has been just a lot of, groundwork that is really paying off dividends. But that's the thing, we're at a place where there has to be, we know this. We can't be lazy and just rely on others to fight the battle for us. We have to be involved. We have to be engaged. We need to support those state and federal organizations that are fighting the fight, clearly. But we can't, and while that's important and contributing to them, we can't just think, well, now I've done my job, I can just sit back and do other things, let them do all the work. No, we have to be personally invested as well. I could tell you, look, get involved in party politics, become poll watchers, help candidates, raise money, contribute to them, block walk for them, keep the pressure on your legislators, call them. I will tell you, please do those things. Those things are important. All those things are good. All those things are needed. But over the long haul, let me put to you, there's one thing that really makes a difference, and I think is really important over the long haul, and that is affecting your sphere of influence. I know a lot of times we get frustrated because we think, CNN is so big, MSNBC, well, they're actually not that big, but they have so much, that's right, they have so much airtime. How can I overcome what CNN has? They have so much more money, so many more stations, blah, blah, blah. You know what? Here's the thing. You can't worry about what you can't control, first of all. Forget about CNN. Focus on your sphere of influence, because that's where we can make a difference with your family, with your friends. One of my daughters, who's very pro-gun, they're all pro-gun, all my children, but she has actually a friend from Massachusetts who she grew up anti-gun liberal. Well, she was down visiting us, and they're good friends, and so she wanted, my daughter wanted to take her to the range, and this guy was very open to that. So we came to the range. Of course, as we're in the car, I'm going through the safety rules with her. I wanted to make sure she had this in mind because she didn't grow up with this. We get into the range. We're walking, through the back of the aisles, through the back of where people are shooting. I start setting up the station, setting up some of the firearms that I'm going to let her use. And normally, as you're walking through, and this was an indoor range, you're hearing pop, 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 that kind of sound. Well, with the guy next to us, God bless him, what he had sounded fantastic. But it wasn't no pop, pop, pop. It was kaboom, kaboom. And the thing was, you could feel it through the partition. Well, that didn't bother me. I mean, that's freedom, right? Okay? But for her,